Rwanda is the hot country in Africa in terms of cycling. In 2025, the World Championships will be organised in a nation that loves and lives this sport like few others, and whose performance centres, where veteran European cyclists such as the Estonian Rein Taaramäe have trained, have become the object of desire of the best cyclists in the world to train at altitudes of over 2,000 metres. Rwanda also hosts the most important cycling competition in Africa, the Tour of Rwanda, and it's there where our protagonist of today, the Colombian Jhonatan Restrepo, has become a legend in his particular story. You want to know about it? Well, without further ado, let this show begin. Jhonatan Restrepo stood out at a very young age in Latin American cycling. At just 23 years of age, he won the Pan American road race, supported by his teammate Wilmer Paredes, and even finished third in the 2015 Vuelta a la Juventud, the race of youth, behind Richard Carapaz, whom he even beat in the stage. Restrepo did not correspond to the profile of the typical scarab cyclist. He was a multi-tool, capable of winning in small group sprints, pedalling well in the time trial, and overcoming with the very best in the mid-mountains. A difficult guy to squeeze into a cycling profile, which did not prevent him from signing for the Russian Katusha team in that same 2015 after the magnificent results that he had acquired. However, his story in the European outfit would be very different from what he promised in his home country. Estranged from his wife and son, Restrepo began to lead a bad life in Granada, Spain, where he resided. Despite Katusha's numerous attempts to make Restrepo a competitive man, he was only really used to carry drums for their leaders in a Russian team that was very demotivated after the IOC had sanctioned Russia, which led to the expulsion of all its athletes from the Olympic Games. The Russians thought that they had signed a climber, simply because he was Colombian. But no, he was a cyclist with very different characteristics. The comments amongst the team managers were as harsh as if they had signed the most pitiful Colombian ever. But even so, in the last year of his contract, Restrepo found enough motivation to achieve good results. He changed his nutritionist and doctor, and that, coincidentally, made him a stronger rider and more focused on his results on the road. And thus, in stage 11 of the 2018 Vuelta a España, he ended up in a breakaway of very high level, in which cyclists like Thibaut Pinot, Jack Haig and Bauke Mollema were part. And Restrepo gave it gas as very few imagined that he could. He was trucking. In a day of medium mountains, he topped the Alto de Cabazoas against the Italian BMC rider Alessandro De Marchi, a specialist in this type of breakaway. Unfortunately for Pacora, the Transalpine veteran left him stranded on the last climb, and he had to settle for second on the stage. A good result, but insufficient in 3 years in the World Tour, so he had no choice but to take the Avianca flight back to his native Colombia. There, he signed for the mythical Manzana Postobon team, which in 2017 was invited to the Vuelta a España, and where he would again coincide with his teammate Wilmer Paredes. Restrepo started with the pink team at a good level, as demonstrated by his third place in the second stage of the Tour of Turkey, behind Bora's Sam Bennett and Felix Großschartner. However, just 2 months later, the shadow of doping appeared over Colombian cycling, and Manzana Postobon in particular. A tip-off after the arrest of doping doctor Alberto Beltran, already involved in the Jacobea Galicia issue after the departure of José Bastida, and so disliked by the Galician fans of the channel, led to the UCI closing down a laboratory in Bogotá where all kinds of doping mythologies were practiced on the local riders. Shortly after, the news broke that 8 Manzana Postobon riders had tested positive for different substances in the Vuelta a Colombia. Amongst them, the great friend of Restrepo, Wilmer Paredes, doped with EPO, as demonstrated by the out-of-competition controls. Our protagonist of today was not suspended nor sanctioned because he did not participate in the Vuelta a Colombia. and therefore no samples of his were found positive in any of the competitions in which he participated for Manzana Postobon. However, the charismatic soft drink brand cancelled its sponsorship, and therefore Restrepo was left without a job. But miraculously, the legendary Gianni Savio, discoverer of legends such as Nelson Cacaito Rodriguez, or more recently, the first Colombian Tour winner, Egan Bernal, remembered Jhonatan Restrepo and signed him for his European Androni team for 2 seasons. Restrepo and Androni formed a perfect marriage. A guerrilla team had hired a stage hunter with no victory in his career, but only because of how poorly it had been managed to date. The training was spectacular, and while Restrepo was training with Rigo Uran on the Colombian roads, in Europe it was the ex-monument winning cyclist Michele Bartoli, linked to Dr. Ufe Fuentes in the Operation Puerto under the nickname of Sansone, and with 2 rich blood transfusions performed in 2003, who was training and improving the performance of a Restrepo who up until then was lost. But where our Colombian friend achieved his successes, beyond the 2 simple stages in the humble Vuelta a Táchira, was in Rwanda. Restrepo had no problem participating in the African race, and he let his director, Gianni Savio, know. The Colombian rider quickly responded with a spectacular performance, winning as many as 4 different stages of the 8 that made up the competition. All of them were won in different ways, as Restrepo was able to win alone after a distant attack, also from a reduced group sprint, and then also sweep the individual time trial of 4.5 kilometers on the penultimate day. Believe it or not, his poor performance in the mountains prevented him from winning the race, and he only finished 6th on the GC, despite winning half of the stages. Restrepo disappeared for the rest of the season, but he had made a record for history. At that time of year, after finishing the Tour of Rwanda, he was the professional rider with the most victories in the world. We don't know what motivation Restrepo has in this African territory, but the following year, in 2021, he participated again in the Tour of Rwanda, and again with great results. This time he was just short of winning the final classification, with a notorious 5th place. But he won again in the same time trial that he had won last year, and whose stage profile ended up the Mur di Kigali. And thus, he confirmed that all his cycling victories outside of Colombia were in Rwanda, and, moreover, his most prestigious results. 4 stage victories, but he was not unleashed upon Europe, despite the good performance of this rider in the Italian classics at the end of the year. Still, he got Savio's blessing to re-sign for Androni in 2022, and again he has only managed to excel in the Tour of Rwanda. He managed a powerful sprint victory after coming close days earlier in the Kigali prologue. He wouldn't win the final classification, and even his words that his dream is to win a Milano San Remo sound like a laugh. But with such an irregular cycling profile, you never know. One day you were born a stinker in the peloton, and the next day you become, at least, the new Santiago Botero, capable of winning in the Alps and in the World Time Trial. That's cycling. And that's the story of Colombia's greatest asset to winning the Cycling World Championships in 3 years' time.